So my friend broke up with me. I had a friend breakup. On this channel, I've made a few videos about gay friendships and different stories, specific stories with gay friends that I've had, and I've talked about how I feel like it's just more complicated to navigate gay friendships than regular friendships. This could just be in my head, and it could just be like a coincidence that I've had some frustrating, overly complicated gay friendships, like psychologically speaking. But this newest example would seem to indicate that it is a real thing, that gay friendships are just harder to maintain. And I'm very curious what you guys think about this once you hear this story. So for some context, I met this friend like 6 months ago on Grindr, which of course, like, that's not the best place to make friends, but it really was an easy, organic friendship. From the very beginning, we kind of established a friend vibe. It never went beyond that. We never hooked up, none of that. I believe that on any of these apps, by the way, you control the narrative. Like, it doesn't matter if it's historically a hookup app or whatever, or even like on Tinder, it doesn't matter if it's a dating app. If you set boundaries and you make it very clear, like you're very transparent and honest about what you're seeking, I think that you can find whatever you want. You just have to be clear with your intentions. So I was with him from the beginning, and I think he respected that. And so we became fast friends here in Miami. Because I was new to Miami, he was eager to introduce me to people he knows, and I think maybe see if I could be like integrated in his group of friends. And we're gonna call him Mark to make this easy throughout the video so I don't keep saying my friend. My friend Mark started introducing me to people. So in the beginning, he was very proactive. We hung out all the time. We texted all the time, messaged on Instagram, back and forth, whatever. And it was just a quick, easy friendship. And sometimes in life, you don't really know exactly why, but you just kind of click with someone and it's easy and you're both kind of on the same page that it's a different friendship, right? Like, it's a genuine bond, and at least in my mind, like, it had the potential to be like a long-term friendship. You just kind of get each other, right? So fast forward to 2021, right? The holidays pass. I come back to Miami after the holidays, spending time with family, and the dynamic kind of changed. I felt like I was inviting him now to things, and I was saying, hey, want to do this together, want to do that, and we would hang out here and there, but for the most part, he would not really express interest in doing stuff together. And a few times what happened was that he would decline, but then an hour or two later he'd be like, oh, actually, we're not gonna go out to do X, Y, and Z, you should come with. Which was bittersweet for me because it's like, you're being included, so it's better than not having any plans. But it's also like, so you're not down to do what I suggested one-on-one, like, only because these other people are now around, do you wanna hang out? So that's when our dynamic started kind of rubbing me the wrong way, and I was like, that's kind of odd, but I didn't think that much of it. I didn't make a big deal out of it. And so the last time I saw him was this game night where in the beginning we actually played, you know, like card games and stuff, but we were drinking, and then somebody passed around a joint, and so then progressively the games became more sort of intense and like party oriented. So it became more like truth or dare and never have I ever and that kind of thing. Now, for the record, I'm not really an avid like drug user or even like weed, which is legal in so many states. Like, I don't think it's a big deal, but I'm just not an avid smoker or anything like that. But, you know, when you're drinking and somebody's passing around a joint, I might huff and puff. And so I did. And I will say that the rest of the night then just like turned, like, because of the weed, I got very paranoid and very anxious. And when I look back on it, that whole week I was very stressed, and I was looking forward to kind of like decompressing that weekend. And I think I went there with that intention, but the weed brought that like insecurity and anxiety to the surface. And what ended up happening was I was probably kind of annoying that whole night, to be honest, because I was paranoid about this and that, and I was over-analyzing and questioning this and that. And the next morning I remember feeling kind of embarrassed because he was the only one, Mark, who I actually had a relationship with there. Everybody else was someone I was meeting for the first time, or it was the second time seeing them, and I was like, wow, they're gonna think this guy's like, you know, really uptight and intense and whatever, but it was just like a one-time bad experience, I guess. That was the last time I saw him. After that, I would text here and there, and I felt like he wasn't really that engaged in communicating, and I thought back to what I mentioned earlier about how it seemed like I was always inviting him to things. So I thought, you know what, let me just give him some space. Like, let him come to me and just do my own thing. But then weeks went by and we hadn't spoken, which was very odd because we had been speaking many times every week. Like, even if we didn't see each other every single week, we would at least text, I would say every like 2 to 3 days, just to like check in and, I don't know, talk about some random thing. So it was very strange to go from that dynamic of hanging out all the time, talking all the time, even if just by text, to radio silence, right? So in my head, I'm kind of like, damn, like what happened to my friendship? And this was my closest friend in Miami. Like I said, we just clicked and we moved sort of quickly as friends. So it was kind of a mindfuck for me, but you never know what people are going through. And so I thought, again, just some space and we'll see what happens. So all this time passes, I don't hear from him. And finally one day I call him because I know that he prefers phone calls anyway over text messages. So I call him and he ignores my call. He doesn't answer. And then he's like, oh, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, I just want to talk, like, call me back when you're free. Never calls me back. So at this point I'm like, okay, he just doesn't care about this friendship anymore, I guess. Weeks more go by and I notice that he always watches my Instagram stories. So he's still watching them. So he's still like engaged or like trying to see what I'm up to, but he's not interacting with me. And even if he had forgotten to call me back, now that you're seeing me all the time on social media, like you're remembering me, why are you not reaching out? Like what happened? So finally one day I see that he saw my story and I also had just had a lot of coffee, so I was kind of like, manic, and I was like, you know what, fuck it. Like I don't understand this. I hate confusion. I hate mixed signals. I've said that before on this channel. I hate confusion. It makes me anxious. I hate not understanding what somebody's thinking or feeling. So I sent him a screenshot of me, like I see that he saw my story and I'm like, why do you watch my stories, but like we haven't been speaking? Like what happened to our friendship? And he answers, I don't know how to answer that. So again, now I'm getting really anxious and I'm like, just fucking tell me, okay? Like just explain to me. So I call him again because I know that he's a caller. And I'm like, let me just get to the bottom of this. He ignores my phone call again. And he goes, I'm really busy right now. I'll call you when I get out of work if you want. And I was like, okay. And then he never called me. So, of course I obsess over it for a few days because that's my personality. And I'm like, in a sense, mourning that friendship. I'm like, this friendship is over. Like this kid who I thought I had a close friendship with and that I was building a close, in my mind, potentially a long-term friendship with, he wasn't thinking the same thing, or like something switched, something happened, and he just doesn't care anymore. And my first thought was, because it was the only thing that kind of made sense to me, otherwise there was no like blowout fight, there was no incident where that I felt was worthy of ending a friendship. So my first thought was, maybe he wanted it to turn into something more, and he thought that just by being around each other enough, even if I had made it clear I wanted to just be friends, that it would organically turn into something more. So I was upset about it, I was disappointed, and he was like my only real friend here. Like I have acquaintances, I know, people I've met, but he's the only one who I was really like, you have those people that you can call or text at any time and you'll do something together. And you don't have to think about like, oh, do I want to hang out with this person, or like would this person even want to hang out? It's like you're on the same sort of level of understanding that you can just call each other and go do something that day or that weekend. He was that for me, and he was the only person that I had that kind of relationship with here. I had that relationship with other people in New York City, in LA, but here, only having been in Miami for a year and having spent most of this year under like COVID restrictions, he was my only friend that was like that. Oh shoot, they're doing like yard work maintenance. Hold on, let me move my microphone a little bit closer. All right, guys, normally I would just do this video later, but I'm already like 3/4 of the way through the story. I apologize if you hear the noise in the background. What can I do? 11:30 on a Saturday. By the way, it sucks that they have to work on 11:30 on a Saturday. Why wouldn't the landlord ask them to do this on weekdays while people aren't home? Anyway, well, I guess people are still working from home speaking of COVID. Anyway, so days later, like I said, I've sort of like mourned this friendship and I'm just kind of upset about it, but I'm, you know, moving on. He calls me out of the blue and I'm like, oh, it's Mark. I answer and I'm like, hi, what's going on? And he's like, oh, you know, I'm good, whatever, what's going on with you? And I'm like, you know, in my mind, I'm like, let's skip the small chat, like just, what's going on, right? And he essentially was like, after the last time I saw you, I just felt like I needed some distance from you. I needed some space, and I can't really articulate why. I also don't want to put you down, but I just feel like, you know, I needed space. So of course, me being the kind of person that I am, I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, we're not a couple, right? Like, we're not in a relationship. It's not like we were hanging out every day where you just got sick of me. Like, what caused you to feel this way? And he couldn't tell me why. And I don't know if that was because he was afraid of being hurtful or if he really is that like out of touch with what he feels and it's just kind of like a feeling that like this isn't my kind of guy. But that's the vibe I got, that he couldn't really figure out what it is, but that he just knows he doesn't want to be around me. Now, of course, for me, this is very hurtful because I'm thinking and I said this, I was like, the last time I saw you was not me in my regular state. Like, I was very paranoid because I was high. I was very, very high. And I haven't experienced that in a long time. So I kind of feel like he was judging me for how like my vulnerability in a altered state, which is kind of screwed up, you know? Like, it's bad enough for someone to judge you for that period, but somebody who knows you and who's seen you 90% of it, you know, more than 90% of the time sober, why would you think that? Again, he couldn't really articulate it. But he was kind of like short about it, you know, like, this is just what it is. It is, you know, sorry. So then I thought about my theory that I mentioned earlier. And so I said, is it that maybe you thought deep down, like, because of how we met on this like hookup app, did you think that maybe this would turn into something else? And then when it didn't, you just kind of lost interest? Or is it more that you just feel like as friends, we're just on different wavelengths? And he said, no, definitely not the first one. Definitely the second one. Like, like you said, we're just on different wavelengths. So even though he was repeating back literally the word that I had used, like the phrase that I had used, like, we're on different wavelengths, which by the way, I agree with. I said that because I kind of felt that was true. I was still kind of offended by it because I'm like, what does that mean that you want to end a friendship because somebody's on a different wavelength? Like, I don't know about you guys, for me, to end a friendship, somebody has to really rub me the wrong way to my core, like has to really irk me, and it has to be like a recurring pattern. Or, you know, someone just does something like crazy where like you can't trust their behavior, right? Like, they're violent, they're aggressive, they start a scene every time you see them. So in my mind, I'm like, because that's how I am, I'm like, what did I do that would make somebody switch from one extreme to the other? So we hung up, you know, that was it. I was like, I wish you the best. He was like, likewise. And then that, you know, that was done. And I was feeling kind of like anxious. I was like, I just lost my one like close friend that I had here. And apparently I sabotaged it. Like, I did something to fuck this up. And I talked to a few friends about it. I talked to my brother about it. And it's interesting how my gut reaction was to blame myself, right? Like, coming from a place of insecurity, like, what did I do to merit going from what I thought was a solid friendship to just like jarringly, he doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. And it's interesting that out of the few people I spoke to in my circle, they all were coming from a place of, well, what's wrong with this guy that this is how he behaves? And I thought that was really fascinating, that I immediately, and this is a pattern for me with, you know, getting rejected from a job interview, friends, family stuff, dating, I will always come from a place of like, what did I do wrong? And so it was fascinating for me to hear people who know me well, their first thought was like, what's up with him, meaning Mark, that he would switch like this and that he would want to end a friendship over what seems pretty innocuous. And so I've been thinking about this the past few days, and another thing I've noticed is that sometimes I look at things almost too logically. Like, I expect things to make sense in a logical way, right? If a friend is breaking up with you, then you're like, what caused this? Like, what part did I play? But as I get older, I realize that a lot of things in life don't really make sense logically, because emotions are involved and ego is involved, and like people's baggage that they come with is involved. So I guess that's part of maturing too, to realize like just because I handle friendships and I operate a certain way when it comes to friendships and what is worthy of ending a friendship doesn't mean that everybody's that same way. Not everybody even views friendship the same way. Like for me, he would have had to really screw up for me to end that friendship, because in my mind, we were at a stage where it's like, I'm now loyal to you. But maybe he's not loyal. Maybe he like doesn't care about loyalty. He just wants to have like people to have fun with, and people who are this analytical, who make like 30-minute long videos on YouTube, isn't really the kind of person he wants to be around, which is, he's allowed. I guess for me, what really fucked with me is the fact that we did have, I thought, a close friendship for a while, and then for it to just switch like that is very jarring, and it makes me uncomfortable to think like, I didn't read this person the right way. Like this dynamic wasn't at all what I thought it was. But again, I wonder how much of this is like a gay phenomenon. I find that my friendships with gay men are always, almost always complicated like this, where there's a significant amount of what I detect as like emotional immaturity. Ironically, since we kind of drifted away, I've been hanging out a lot with friends of friends who I met through him. So it's like people who he maybe met once or so, but I just met them also by chance, and I just, again, clicked with them, and they are straight, and they're of a different sort of like vibe, environment, whatever. They're here for the winter from New York City. So I do wonder too how much of this is like cultural. Like I lived for almost 10 years in New York City. New York City, you know, it's ambitious, like young urban professionals, more so type A, more sort of cerebral. And I find that a lot of the people I meet here in Miami, to use that word again, they're on a different wavelength. Like here it's way more laid back, it's more casual. People aren't as ambitious or driven or creative. They kind of just want to have fun, they want to be social, they want to be out. And I'm drawn to that, but I still have that other aspect of me that is ambitious, that is grounded in like, you know, my long-term vision for myself. I think you can want all those things, right? Like you don't have to be black or white with these aspects. So it's interesting that over just, I don't know what, like 5-6 weeks, I've become strangely close, like quickly very close to people who I ironically met through him. And they're now closer to me than I am to the guy who I met 6 months ago, who I was much closer to for that whole period. And so it does make me think, again, like, okay, maybe that's just chance, it's just you click with who you click with, but how much of it is like, you spend enough time in one place and that it ends up always being a part of you. Meaning, when I was with Mark and his friends, for me there was often a disconnect where I'm just like in a different sort of mindset than the friends he hangs out with. The friends he hangs out with are more like him, where they don't have like a regular job. They're very into nightlife and partying, and they still can be smart and have, you know, passions and can be creative people, but generally I find that the lot of people he hangs out with are, it seems to me, a bit more superficial in their values, which is a judgment. But when you're new to a place, I think you're more open-minded about the kind of people you hang out with. And if these are his friends, then it's like, I was willing to be open-minded, I guess. But I now look at it and I think maybe it is just like, you're compatible with the people who are on your wavelength, and you're not with the people who have a totally different life and lifestyle. And the more I think about it, right, it's kind of like dating, right? The more you think about why it didn't work out with someone, the more you remember things that you had forgotten about, that in the moment had kind of maybe irked you, and you were like, that's weird to me, like that doesn't click, that is so like not the way that I process things. But you overlook it when it's your friend, right? Or when you like the person. And maybe from his side, he felt the same way about me, where it was just little things that weren't a big deal, but then it kept adding up to a disconnect. So I can respect that, but it's still hurtful, right? Because you're like, what's wrong with me? Like, what did I do? What's interesting is in the past, especially with gay friendships that have not worked out for me, what I've often seen is a pattern of like, they're kind of ruthless in disconnecting. And even I've had some straight friendships like that too, where a friend just really lets me down. And then again, I take my time to kind of mourn the friendship, but then the person will come back into your life because they miss you, because they're bored, whatever. And in some cases, I've let them back in, but very, very cautiously. And the friendship would eventually fail because I had already moved on. I'd already mourned the friendship. And a part of me almost feels like, you know, the fact that he called me to tell me I just needed distance, it's not exactly like telling someone, I don't like you, I never want to see you again. It's not like a blowout fight. But in my mind, that's saying we're no longer friends. And even though as I get older, I learn the importance of not seeing things so black and white, for me, loyalty and friendship is black and white. Like, you're my friend or you're not my friend. You know, I don't need a friendship break. To me, that's like ridiculous. Like, if we have a friendship break, we're just not friends, and that's okay, but then it's a done deal, the door is closed. And I have this sneaking suspicion that maybe this will be like other situations where eventually he circles back, but I will have already moved on. Like, this isn't how I do friendships. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe he really is done and he wants nothing to do with me. But again, it's possible that he views friendships differently, where for him it's just like, like leave me alone, even just like for a bit. Whereas for me, that's like a permanent thing. All right, this video has been insanely long, long rants. I'm curious what you guys think. Of course, whenever I invite opinions into like personal things, like these personal story times, I feel like I'm setting myself up for like ridicule or judgment, but this really threw me for a loop. And I guess part of it too is like control, right? Like, when you're in control of the narrative, it's a different situation. When my friendships end, it's usually me who says so, because the person has really, really like wronged me to my core. Like, I'm like, I've given everything I can to this person. This is an unusual situation in that it's somebody else flipping the script on me without me sort of understanding why. And that's been like painful. So for me, the lesson is I think I have to maybe be more open-minded to friendships that aren't quick to develop. Like, be more open-minded to people who I've met who it wasn't an obvious connection at first, but maybe those are the people who actually stick around longer. You know, like that saying, easy come, easy go. I think sometimes when something moves quickly, it's actually likely to leave your life just as quickly. It's the same thing with dating, right? They say, how you got him is how you'll lose him. But I am really genuinely curious what you guys think, because this one really threw me for a loop. Until next time.